Marriage Champions! I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative. Today, I have not one, but two special guests with me, a dynamic mother-daughter duo, Lauren Reitsema and Joneen MacKenzie. Joneen and Lauren come to us from Denver's Center for Relationship Education, which Joneen founded, and where they serve as president and vice president, respectively. Joneen's the lead author of the nationally acclaimed Real Essentials curriculum and has certified over 10,000 educators to empower their students. Lauren spent the past 15 years teaching relationship skills to youth, adults, and corporate teams. Together, they co-authored the recent book, Relationship Essentials: Skills to Feel Heard, Fight Fair, and Set Boundaries in All Areas of Life, which uses an analogy of a toolbox to introduce usable and practical relationship concepts. Oh, Joneen and Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
We're excited.
Oh, it is just great to see you again. I wanted to ask you, you describe the Center for Relationship Education as an organization that makes it simple and fun for anyone to learn about themselves and how to enhance their relationships. I would call that a fair explanation of the book as well. Tell me a little bit about what motivated you guys to write it.
Well, so many people have always asked me in the curriculum space, do you have a book? Do you have something that we can introduce the why with? It's a little bit more tangible because curricula is certification, it's training, it's credentialing. And we've always said no. And an opportunity came up for us to potentially bring what we do nationally and globally to more of a digestible platform. And so we thought, let's take a stab at it. And here we are releasing a book. It's going to be really fun.
Well, and you two work together. How fun was this also for you to write a book together? How did that go?
So fun. And I love this woman because she knows what she wants. It was really easy. She had deadlines and this is what I want you to do. And here's the outline. It was easy and fun and spectacular experience.
Well, I really enjoyed reading it. I was so grateful to get a sneak peek already. So you talked about in the book about humanity's best and strongest nature is when people live in connection, linked by that strong foundation. And beautifully around where you live in Denver, you've got the gorgeous aspen trees that kind of illustrate that with their root structures. Could you explain how that applies to people?
Yeah, so I grew up in the mountains of Colorado. It's where we are now raising my future current family, future legacy. And there's something that's always been captivating about the aspen tree because it is the most spectacular season, at least for me, when you get to drive up that mountainscape and see the glowing, gorgeous hues that transform the landscape. And I actually love aspen trees so much that we planted a couple of them in our landscaping projects when we first moved into this new house. And I realized, one moment it was fall and October, which that's one of my favorite seasons. It's my birthday month. I love October. And I walked out and there's one aspen tree and a couple glowing yellow leaves. And I thought, well, that's underwhelming. And I realized I'm a metaphor thinker. I like to think about how things are relatable when they're visual. And so I thought about the differentiation between driving up to the mountains and being captivated by this cluster of thousands of trees changing together versus the ho-hum haphazard. Well, there's one tree with a couple changing leaves. And what I've always known about the root system of the aspen trees is that those clusters, thousands of trees, share one interconnected root system. And I think as humans, we oftentimes are talking about self-actualization or being on your own and being capable. And as much as that's beneficiary in certain contexts and relationship, I think it actually robs us of the beauty of being connected. And so trying to connect human relationship through the unity of one root system as the human race, I think can go a long way in bridging some of these gaps as people feel isolated and stressed and alone.
I'd like to add something to that because just recently I looked at the data in regard to suicide for states, and Western states, where there's rugged individualism, we have this attitude of, we don't need anybody else. I don't know if it's correlational. I'd like to explore it some more, but oh my goodness, why is it happening in Western states? Primarily these high suicide rates. So we need each other. We absolutely, for mental health, for wholeness, for life is hard. And we just need to be able to be in community to do it well and to have fun doing it.
Well, and that's the rub, right? Sometimes being in community, there's some obstacles, and I know one of the things we talked about, and that you mentioned in the book too, it's wise to learn some new skills. I know we talked about that a little bit, that there seems to be people are reluctant to want to get to seek help, and let's talk about that, either one of you, about why this is smart, why this book is helpful.
We're trying to reframe the culture to say relationship skills should be the first and primary thing that all of us are taught, because they're that important.
Yeah. And do people naturally have good relationship skills? Is that something that we're just born with?
No, it's not a passive thing.
And it's so incredible, because what we do is we learn in health class or in life, we learn information, but we don't know how to process that information into skill building. And I'll give you an example. The example is, we thought we knew how to wash our hands until COVID. And then what happened? There was places where they unpacked it and they made it more operationalized. And they said, first you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. That's what we're doing in the book. We're making it very easy and very operationalized.
Well, let's talk about the book. And I mentioned that you use this analogy of a toolbox to kind of address certain relationship skills and how they apply. And was there one that was foundational, or how did you fill your toolbox with tools?
That's a question I think a lot of us get asked when we're doing trainings, or it's just, what do you do first? If I have one thing, what's the most important thing? And I wish I could say we could agree that there's one out of the 10 that you have to prioritize. But I actually think that that's one of the myths of relationship wellness, is that you have to use them together. It's almost like, hey, I have a picture to hang, and I can only pick one tool to do it. But in order to hang a picture, you need the hammer, the nail, the level. You have to have the right kind of stud finder. You have to have, the hook that goes behind it, and the wire. That there's so many elements to relationships. We're not static and we're not one dimensional. And therefore, I think we have to look at it as a collective toolbox and say, we stuck with the number 10. That was very intentional. It's memorable. And we try to prioritize, the top 10 things for relationship toolbox. And I actually find myself, even after writing this, I was joking. I was actually hanging a picture just a couple of days ago in my family. And I was thinking about, when I was leveling it, I thought, oh my gosh, personality differences. We have to level our differences and find common ground in the bubble. And I thought, if I can remember it, this hopefully is going to be practical. So even though we want to say there's one to focus on, I think the real relevant answer to that question would be, you have to pick all 10 of them up and apply them in order to get the best result.
Yeah. I thought they were all very, like you said, easy to remember and yet very practical. Things you talked about was the tape measure and the personal space. And I like you had different levels of space. There was kind of the intimate space and the acquaintance space. What do you think about that space? I mean, that kind of addressed boundaries as well. Have you seen, I thought as I read it, okay, this is funny because acquaintance space may have gotten farther now after we're used to nobody being within 6 feet of us. Have you seen any changes or found ways that space really makes some difference?
Well, spacing, nobody teaches you spacing. It's almost intuitive. Yet I see adults, I just see people getting into each other's spaces, and then the other person feels uncomfortable, but they don't know how to articulate that. They don't know how to get people out of their personal space if they feel uncomfortable. So what we do is we teach a skill that's so easy to learn about. This is the distance of stranger space. This is the distance of friendship space. And this is the distance of intimate space. And so when you teach that, all of a sudden you have a language. You have a tool of language to say, excuse me, you're in my personal space or my intimate space. And you could be kind about it. You don't have to be belligerent or angry, you just all of a sudden know that you feel a certain way, and now you can articulate that feeling well and make some changes. And what that does is it gives you power.
Oh, I love how you said that is articulating it. You have the language to articulate something. So you make changes. That's one thing. A lot of people who are joining us today watching are marriage champions. They may be people at church ministries who might be interested in your book and how it applies to the relationships in their church, whether they're teams or they're couples. I really liked too, you talked about the I'm sorry. It seems that so much in our world today is all about somebody demanding an apology, and how that apology doesn't always mean very much. And one of the things you talked about was the shortcomings of just I'm sorry. Would one of you like to unpack what your thoughts were on that? I thought that was very important, and will probably apply really well to the people who are watching.
Yeah, I think we're always raised, even in raising kids, say you're sorry, say you're sorry. You did something wrong, say you're sorry. And then they go and they begrudgingly say sorry and march off. And it's not enough. It's not enough as kids. It's not enough as adults. It's not enough in anywhere in between there, because I'm sorry it lacks a lot of the depth of ownership that I think the competencies of relationship wellness start with owning your part in every hurt, even if it wasn't intentional. And I think, the shortcomings of I'm sorry, this isn't the first time that these concepts maybe have been written down on paper, but the way we wanted to frame it was to really put them into practical frameworks that you could actually say, oh, okay, which parts of I'm sorry am I missing? And ownership is a big one for us, for everybody, but ownership, I opened that chapter with a story that I observed in a park where with blatantly the parent enabled a child to not own a really real mistake. And I just sat there dumbfounded, but this is the norm. People are so quick to blame their teacher, their parents, their pets, the traffic, the weather, whatever it is. And what has happened that we've gotten so distant from the capacity to say, I messed up. I was wrong. And here's what I did that was wrong. And this is how it affected you. And therefore I want to change my behavior to not do that again. But instead we just say sorry and walk away. And so I think this is a really fun concept to explore, because if we can get more comfortable with ownership, then I'm sorry has more meaning than just some empty words.
Yeah. There also was, you had a forgiveness formula where you talked about that to kind of on top of that, I'm sorry, to help make it more meaningful. Was there an example of that?
So the formula is something that we also, again, it kind of took the pieces of expertise that we've seen and we've been a part of and said, okay, how do we make this a skill and a tool? And so it gives some blank spaces to fill in those shortcomings, and then say all the pieces of the apology and asking for forgiveness can be in kind of a sentence structure that people can just, when you're starting it at first, it might feel really robotic or a little bit even forced, but at least you'll have the elements there. So as you become better at using this tool, it can get you to a place of fullness and not just shortchange the process.
I think an apology needs to come from the heart, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're so mad you just want to get it over with and say you're sorry. And if you go through the process of the wording that we put together, the tools in the toolbox, the feelings come later. In other words, I'll give you an example. I've moved a lot in my life, and I was in a community and nobody brought me muffins or cookies, right? And so when I'm moving, I see somebody else coming into the neighborhood, and my first feeling is I'm too busy to make muffins or cookies. But I do it because I know I should do it, and I know I want to welcome this new neighbor into the neighborhood. And then I bring over the muffins, and then I meet them, and then I think, oh, that's why I'm doing this, because my heart becomes involved.
I love that. And what does that do when your heart becomes involved? How does that benefit you?
Oh my gosh, it's so authentic. It's so human. I mean, when we just say, I'm sorry, it dehumanizes us as robots. One of the things that Lauren and I, and even in our agency, the Center for Relationship Education, we talk about, we want to enhance the human experience. And many of the things that we do in life, that when life is so hard and it's so fast paced, we dehumanize each other. And our job, as we see it, is to enhance our humanity and say, this is why we were created for more. We were created for that heartfelt, authentic space where people can be who they are, and we can be who we are, and we can connect.
And this book really has, your ideas really help people kind of get over some of those obstacles and use the toolbox to build something new and better. I know another one I really liked. Don't remember the name of the tool, but it was gratitude.
Yes. Gratitude was the battery, because, it powers everything. If you have, and in every tool, whether it's a flashlight or you have even a stud finder that beeps, in order for things to work, you have to have some sort of power source. And whether that's a plug-in electric power tool, or there's a lot more battery powered things in today's generation, because it's such a quick, we don't always have current running through society, and we want to take our tools with us. But if you're powered and charged with gratitude, there is no stopping that positive energy. And so if you think about a battery, the positive energy is driving. If it's full, if it's a battery that's working, then it's going to have energy. And if it's one that's dead, right, you need to throw that out and get a brand new one. But the interesting thing is that batteries don't work in only positive. They have a negative charge in order to have both sides. And so we have to take the negative things that happen and then supercharge them with gratitude, so that we can start to see and reframe that energy towards something that charges us up. So that's a good test, because what tool was it? Oh, gratitude. Oh yes, the battery. So this we can remember it, and hopefully all of our readers can remember it, and it'll be something that we can infuse in our day-to-day.
And an example of that, and it's in the book, about, I recently had a car accident. Somebody ran a red light and threw me, in a 360 and hit a tree, and I was really hurt. And what happened was, I was overwhelmed with gratitude that I was able to walk out of that car, that I was able to get on a plane. It was a little bonehead thing to do, but I got on a plane and I went to a training, and I didn't realize how hurt I was, because I was so filled with gratitude that I was okay. When I thought I was okay.
When I read that, my immediate thought was, oh my gosh, Joneen, you're okay. And you depicted.
I hate that it happened, but it was providential timing for that example of the book, because I said, are you okay? And the very first thing she said was, I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful to be okay. And it changed the energy of our connection. It allowed me to find rest. It allowed me to give hope, but and then all the yucky stuff that happens after that, it was not lost on the pain and the expenses and the inconveniences. But if we lead with gratitude, there's nowhere but hope to point.
Yeah. And I am so glad that you're okay. And that really does illustrate that point, because if you can be grateful at that level of a circumstance that would really throw a lot of people for a loop, then that really speaks to be able to take what you're purporting and teaching, and that becomes part of your life. Like you said, it becomes part of your heart. How do you so we have the book, but then you also teach workshops. How does this information and this material dovetail with each other?
So we actually are we're not designed to be a direct service company exclusively, in that the heart of our mission at the Center for Relationship Education is relationship skills training, so that we can equip leaders, executives, HR directors, teachers, anyone in a helping space that wants to infuse relationship skills training into their line of work or experience, which I believe is almost everyone in the world that can infuse relationship skills training into their day-to-day. But oftentimes people are struggling to find the how. They know the why, they maybe know the what, but they don't know the how. And so Real Essentials is the training grounds. It's the platform to be able to equip people with objectives and materials and step-by-step, so that they can take our model of proven effective strategies into their line of work or into their education space and say, here's how to do relationships well. And then it's like a math class, right? You have how to add fractions. There's a method for that. We have a method for how to do relationship training. And we try and choose a method that's fun, engaging, activity-based, and that's transformative. So it's been a journey. We continue to expand how the tools are applied. This book isn't necessarily one for one, it's not designed to be a part of the curricula, but rather a gateway or a teaser into what you'll experience if you choose to come down that certification path.
So along with the book, you guys also do some certification training and different types of workshops. How would someone connect with you best to be able to access your resources?
Well, it's World Wide Web culture. So we definitely have all of the different tracks and places to connect with us on our website. So if you visit www.myrelationshipcenter.org, once again, www.myrelationshipcenter.org, you can find out about some of our local workshops and projects, our national work, the Train the Trainer certification model, and even sample some of our curricula. But primarily, I mean, the book hopefully is a conduit for people understanding that relationship skills training exists and that it is practical. It's not necessarily just theoretical or philosophical. And hopefully it'll just be an encouragement to people to say, oh, here's a starting point, and we're relational. We want to talk to you even after this interview. So call us and we'll typically answer the phone.
And we train the trainers so that you could take this curriculum into your workspace, into your church, into your schools, into your community, so that it's scalable and it's replicatable. And that's why we certify and train people so that they can take this and serve their community.
And the whole premise and the whole foundation is, at the end of the day, is that we were made for that connection, going back full circle to the Aspen tree analogy. And in that, there are ways to do things better, to be more successful in relationships, whether it's, again, like you said, a relationship in a marriage, a relationship with others, with peers, and these are some ways. Any favorites that you had? Any special things that really resonate? I mean, I know you said all 10 in the toolbox, but anything that like really was a story from the book that really warmed your heart?
Oh man,
that's a hard question. There's so many stories one of the things that we talk about is traditions and celebrations and legacy. And one of the stories is about how I kind of ruined my children for birthdays for their spouses because I didn't have a birthday day. I had a birthday month. And birthdays were very important to me. So we had theme parties and all that kind of. And so what that says is, look at your legacy, look at your traditions, look at what you came from and what you want to continue and what you might want to throw away. What might you want to start new traditions with your new family or your new spouse or your new friends or something to do in the workplace. This is a way to really create what you want in your relationships and how close you want to be.
I love the story that you have a birthday bag. I would love to peek into your birthday bag and see.
No, traveled with me this weekend. It's been decades. My birthday was last week, so I know the birthday bag well. Sometimes I'd like to toss it over the shoulder,
but it's a legacy.
So fun.
It's right.
So fun. It's become a family favorite and an iconic tradition.
Well, and you mentioned in the book too about how you are passing that legacy down to your daughter, where she, you so beautifully were asking her. It was in your chapter about expectations, I believe, and you were so beautifully talking to your daughter, who was, I don't know, 5 or 6 at the time.
Yes. Yeah. What do you want?
Yeah, trying to make her birthday dream come true. And when she wanted a Disney character to fly in from her castle, that's when you realized the expectations were a little too high.
Yes, that's when you have a realistic conversation and say, I want to give you everything you want, but it's not going to happen. So let's adjust those expectations a little bit so that you don't live in disappointment.
Yeah, and you beautifully wrote how you did that, and how you helped her encapsulate exactly what the most important thing was, what she was thinking about, and it was all about the hair, right?
It was Elsa braid party. I couldn't get Arendelle flights, but I could get a braid on her beautiful mane. So we figured that one out. She's 11 now, so that was a while ago, but we still remember it.
But the implications of that is amazing, because when you think about how people don't articulate their expectations,
Yes.
and then they end up disappointed, and they don't know why they're disappointed, and something's just not right. If you are willing to write down what it is that you want for a holiday, for a birthday, for a dinner, for going to an event, write down those expectations and articulate them to others, so that they know what you're looking for. And more people, if they know what you're looking for and they're realistic, they will meet your expectations.
Well, that sounds like a recipe right there. It's very useful for life. Is there anything else I've forgotten to ask? Anything about the experience of writing it together, or any other tool or thought from your work that you'd like to make sure we get across to our people watching?
I think one thing I like to always say, because it's this is a little vulnerable here, but it's an insecurity to write about relational wellness, because we're in relationship with each other and we are not perfect, and we have the same conflict that we wrote about in chapter 5, and we have the same expectation gaps that we wrote about in chapter 3. And so I think what I would say is that let's, just like those Home Depot commercials or those do-it-yourselfer Pinterest boards that just make you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to get that inner Joanna Gaines and go change my house. If you don't have the right resources and practice and community and tools, then nothing is going to change. And so I think just, we're going to level our pride. We're going to try and be approachable. And we always start our experiences with, hey, we're not relationship experts, which people say, well, that's why I came here. We say we're experiencing relationships with you, and we've gained some tools that we want to share with the world, and we actually want to perfect our use of those so that we're growing in our relationship capacities. Just like, hey, when I never had to cook and I was a kid and dinner showed up, and then parents taught you how to cook so you could feed yourself. We want to be empowerers of people using the tools. And I think we sometimes stumble upon people who have an expectation that, okay, well, this didn't work because you didn't do it for me in passively reading the book. Well, we're going to just go ahead and set the expectation now that if you have a beautiful shiny red toolbox and you put every one of these tools in it and maybe have a journal and write it down, but you never actually apply those tools, you're not going to get anything that changes. And so I just think we want to level the playing field and say we're not above anyone for being relationship experts. We actually are so passionate about how these tools used in our own lives have changed legacies and generations. And we just hope that we can come together with a society that says, let's do this together, and be like those empowering Home Depot commercials that make you say, let's do it. We can do this.
Yeah, and Home Depot says, you can do it and we can help.
Right.
I know that this applies to all relationships, but how could this specifically apply to a marriage? Because that's what a lot of our audience is interested in.
Well, I think personally, the tools analogy is really inviting, and it's really memorable for the men in relationships, in particularly in the marriage role, because tools are so ingrained in the nature of, I guess, I do a lot of handiwork around the house too. It's not a gender stereotype, but the idea that, it's not a fluffy, flowery, feelings-based thing. It's really practical and evident in these metaphors. So I think maybe even just saying, hey, a marriage toolbox, a DIY, a refresh. Everybody wants a home improvement project, maybe a marriage improvement resource that could be more palatable than a crisis counseling intervention, or we feel disconnect, but just hey, it's a spring cleaning. What are we doing? What are you dreaming about? You want to get new carpet, you want to paint, and maybe just taking that tools analogy into your relationship and saying, let's refresh and see it from a really positive, proactive, and preventative approach rather than a crisis intervention kind of mode. I think that would be our hope for that.
Because it's not counseling, it's education and skills. That's what it
Yes.
is. It's not counseling, it's education and skills, and everybody needs those.
And if anyone would like to connect more with Joneen and Lauren and CRE, you can find us at samarriage.org. Thanks again.
Thank you.